Hi, I'm Iain Brodie Browne, and I'm the chair of the Social Liberal Forum.
Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. We are back with another episode in our virtual conference series, and this time I am delighted that we have the Social Liberal Forum with us, and even more delighted that I have the chair, Iain Brodie Browne, to join us. How are you doing, Iain?
I'm not so bad, John. How are you?
I'm okay. Dealing with lockdown as best I can. Getting out podcasts, it's as much as us councillors can do, really, because we can't get to the town hall anymore.
No, thank goodness for that. I've been doing it for 38 years. It's about time of the day off.
and we've obviously, this is going out just after what would have been election day for the local election. So it's really unusual for us. Actually, I had almost an April off, which was unheard of.
Absolutely. Well, mind you, we didn't have a bad year last year because we had the local elections, the Euro elections, and the general elections. So
yes,
we earned our calling last year.
Yeah, as my volunteers said to me, I'm glad for a break because I'm knackered, is kind of how they came across. But let's talk about the Social Liberal Forum, because conference hasn't happened in York. Social Liberal Forum's been going for a number of years, but what is the Social Liberal Forum?
Well, I think it's the heart of the party, really. We've been going, well, there's been some radical grouping within the party from the year DOS, hasn't there, really? Go back to any stage in history you like, but we think of the Radical Reform Group, who were the people who rallied around Joe Goodman when he made the great changes in the party. You can see the radical conferences of the 70s and 80s. And here we are, 11 years old now, the Social Liberal Forum, set up in the heart of the coalition times to represent most of the members of the party. So I think broadly you could say we're progressive, the radical wing of the party.
And so what is the main goals of the Social Liberal Forum? Is it to make sure that radical tradition keeps a part of Lib Dem policy?
Well, I think we know from talking to members, and indeed from academic studies, that the overwhelming majority of party members are on the progressive side of the party. Big research document just done last year by Queen Mary University College London, which looked at the social attitudes of Lib Dem party members. Overwhelmingly, they felt that that economic disadvantage had to be tackled, that the government had a place in the redistribution of wealth. Overwhelmingly, they thought that big business was unfair to the ordinary punter. Overwhelmingly, they were in favour of measures which redressed inequality. So the party membership is with us, as that document said. The party membership is a centre-left membership. We represent that tradition, Keynes, Beveridge, the people who brought us the post-war settlement, who gave us, the welfare society, as Beveridge preferred to call it, rather than the welfare state, that gave us the economic insights of Keynes. But not only them, you can think of lots of things, can't you, where that tradition within the party has been crucially important. The whole push in the party for things like the redistribution of ownership. You know, for a generation, the party had a campaign of ownership for all, lasted for all the early years of the 20th century, right through pretty well the 20th century, arguing that people should have a part of the ownership where they worked, that they should own property as a safeguard against bullying and overbearing state, the security it gave them in difficult times. So that tradition of distributionism, I think, is still very important. You know, we're talking about workplace democracy, community politics today, just as much as we were 30, 40, 50 years ago.
And as a little bit of research before doing this interview, I decided to read your constitution. Yeah, and it says here, the aim of developing policies based on social liberal principles. And it says then in brackets, as social liberalism is broadly understood within the traditions of the Liberal Democrats. Now, do you think most people understand the difference between social liberalism and liberalism, is that part of your goal, is really just to say, look, we are the mainstay of this party, like you've just said?
I don't think it's up to debate. We are where the majority of members sit. Their concern for social justice is very clear. So and I say the research from Queen Mary College, and also from our knowledge of what people say to us at conferences when they come and see us, when they vote for our motions, when the chips are down. So I don't doubt about that. We've been working to put flesh on the bones. I think we've lived off the capital of past people for too long. Keynes and Beveridge have been dead a good number of years, and I think we've not really brought us up to date. I thought Paddy was the big exception to that rule. Joe Grimond, Paddy, you can see them. Paddy's book, Citizens Britain, I think was a major contribution. But today, we know the need to present our ideas new and fresh for this generation. And I can just give you a sneak preview. You can be the first to know.
Oh, I love an exclusive.
You've got an exclusive here, lad. All right. We've just appointed a new director of the SLF, who's Iain Cairns. Many people will remember Iain from his speech at the conference a couple of years ago when he joined us from the Labour Party. Iain was the number 2 at the think tank IPPR. He also was for a while the director of IPPR North, and it was in its early stages. Now that is a man with significant pedigree, I have to say. I mean, IPPR is the leading progressive think tank in Britain. And for Iain to come on board as our director, I think gives us a major upgrade in our activities, and I hope that we can continue to put what we've done in the SLF for the last few years. We've published books, we've held conferences, we've done a lot of detailed work. We've attracted academics, not just within the party, but outside of the party to contribute and to bring their knowledge to the debate, much as Joe Grimond did when he took over the party in the late 50s.
It's interesting because we had a podcast with the Lib Dem History Group.
Oh yeah,
and these sorts of the different groupings within the Lib Dems have always existed throughout history. And it's important to remind all listeners and viewers that despite all the differences we might think, actually there's far more that unites every person within the Liberal Democrats than whether you're part of the Social Liberal Forum, Liberal Reform, or the Social Democratic part of it. There's still lots more that unites us than anything else. But it was interesting what happened in that podcast was that I asked the question, which is generally the more successful part of the party? And he said generally the more centrist ground tends to be more successful electorally. But it was interesting that Paddy Ashdown seems to bridge all the areas. Everyone seemed to love Paddy, and he seemed to cut across all wings of the party. Now, is that, you think, a kind of figure we need going forward, that sort of unifying figure?
Well, if you can bring me another Paddy, I should be only too delighted. A man of real stature. Man or woman, I don't mind. I do. I prefer to have a woman. I think we deserve a woman leader. That's by the by. I wish people would read Paddy's writings. I mean, Paddy's writings, people responded to his personality, and that's good. But if you read what Paddy wrote, especially in Citizens Britain, this was a very radical take on reform. And I agree with you, there's a lot more that unites us. But, we are here talking history. I mean, Duncan Brack was here. We could have this conversation with some academic guidance. But, I mean, it is, 60 years ago since Joe Grimond led the rout of the economic liberals when he took them on and destroyed them at the Party Assembly, 1960. There were people who left the party because of Joe's commitment, where he put his commitment to being part of Europe above a purist free trade argument. And that drove people like Arthur Selden, Oliver Smedley, out of the Liberal Party to set up the Institute of Economic Affairs, the people who became the think tank for Thatcherism. So there was a clear divide at that point in the party's history between those who clung to an outdated and outmoded set of ideas. People who, would have found themselves at home with Douglas Carswell, the UKIP MP, who would have seen themselves. And it's interesting that in the Orange Book, the Orange Book was a baggy trousered thing. It wasn't a coherent set of ideas. But those who clung to some of the economic ideas in that, Peter Martin, Marshall, the man who funded it, and was a mainstay of it in many ways. Of course, he campaigned to leave the EU. And not only that, he went on to fund Michael Gove's Tory leadership campaign. Mm-hmm. Now, you see, here is a clear divide on what we believe. We've always seen ourselves on that social liberal wing, and we've never believed those who just seen market solutions and short-term economics as the way forward. And that is where the party as a whole sits. That's the point. The party really doesn't, long-term, have much truck with those who want to take us back to the Arthur Selsdon, Oliver Smedley days.
And I think that kind of leads us nicely on to what we want for the future. Now, obviously, something I've seen from your Twitter and Facebook presence is the fact that you are very much endorsing new policies such as universal basic income. And
well, hang on, John, hang on. That's not new. The Women's Liberals had a fully worked out universal income scheme in the 1940s. In fact, I think there was a bit of discussion between them and Beveridge, because Beveridge's model was based very heavily on the male breadwinner household, whereas the Women's Liberals were coming up with quite a radical idea at that time. But UBI was backed by Joe Grimmon. It's in that Citizens Income book, Citizen Britain book by Paddy. It was championed by Nancy Sear, those of us who remember and revere Nancy Sear. So that's always been part of our tradition, because it's about empowering the individual. It's not about state handouts, it's about giving people this. So that's part of a broader idea, isn't it, about how we can have empowered citizens, as Paddy used to call them. How do we give people the tools to have more control over their own lives? What do we do in the workplace? We've been championing workplace democracy since I can't think when. We've been championing employee ownership since I don't know where. And there is more to do on both those lines. One of the things that struck me about the virus, I don't know if it struck you, is the richness and the dynamism of community activity. We're not being struck by everyone getting on and doing it. My local pub is busy selling scrubs for the NHS. People have gone on and done that. They haven't had the top-down statist approach that would frighten some of us. David Howarth, one of the things we've been doing to develop new ideas and policy, we held actually on Saturday, we held a webinar, and I'll tell you, an impressive list of participants. We had Vince talking to us about economics. We had William Wallace talking to us about the international situation. We had Jane Dodds talking about UBI in particular, actually. We had, on top of that, we had Alan Buck-Philip, Professor Alan Buck-Philip. We had Chris Wilmore. Those from the old ALDC and ALC will remember Chris Wilmore from the Southwest. She was on board as well. Preston girl, Janice Turner was there. We had a whole, David Howarth, Professor David Howarth from Cambridge, former Cambridge Liberal MP, Lib Dem MP, was there. So we had a really heavy duty seminar going on there, trying to flesh out some of those ideas and tease out some of those things that we need to put more work into. And we think that in our think tank role, which Ian Cairns will be leading, that we can actually make a major contribution there.
So I'm looking at the York conference agenda here, and one of the fringes was that you guys were hosting, the Social Liberal Forum were hosting, was 2019 general election. What next after the shambles? Now, given what you talking about, and you admit you're a think tank, you want to change direction and make sure social liberal policies are at the fore. What part of the 2019 general election did you think was the shambles? Was it the implementation of the policies, or was it the policies themselves?
Well, first of all, I ought to say that this was Alistair Carmichael's fringe meeting. The chief whip was speaking at this fringe meeting, and the title was agreed with him. He was quite keen to say what was going to happen next. No, I don't in any way resign from the title. I have to say it was a view that really we had to get our act together, frankly, because it didn't work. The outcome measure was how many seats we won, and frankly, we didn't do well on that outcome measure. And those of us in the north, like you and me, lad, we did very badly. Very, very badly. And I think we've got to face up to that. So we need to start fresh. So I think there was an organisational shambles. I think there was a political shambles in so much as there was too much emphasis on one item. We didn't manage to put a political. I don't disagree with the policy, but I do think that we didn't provide a context for it, or even the depth of other things in that which we should be doing. There were one or two things that did worry me. I was very worried by some of the economic statements that seemed to suggest that we still were not quite understood that balancing the budget was not the first priority at this moment. And that now is clearly not the case. Indeed, I was interested in what Vince was saying to us at the webinar on Saturday, that this should not usher in another bout of austerity. That there are other ways of dealing with the debt that have been properly taken on. I have no problem with it, what we've been borrowing for cheaply. But we need to understand that we don't want to be trying to balance that within 2 or 3 years. That would be just cruel and show we hadn't learned lessons from some of the mistakes in the coalition years. But broadly, let's be clear, that manifesto that Joe Swinson fought on, like the manifesto that Tim Farron fought on, was far more generous to the poor than the Labour Party's manifesto was.
Yeah, the Resolution Foundation said it was the best for the poorest in society.
Yeah, indeed, and so did the Institute of Fiscal Studies. All credits to us for sticking to our guns there. And I credit Tim principally with that. Joe properly and courageously carried on with the line, but it was Tim who made that happen in his general election manifesto. And I salute him for that, because I think that's important that we do that. It'll take a while for us to get credit for that. I don't think it will happen overnight, but I think it has to be a consistent theme of ours that we are prepared to look and redress inequality. I don't know about you, but I'm looking around now and I'm listening to the list of the people who are dying in the coronavirus. Mm. It's not the white middle classes in leafy suburbs, is it? It's it's working class men in manual occupations. They're top of the list. Security guards. They're the people who are taking bus drivers. These are the people who are dying, who are facing significant inequality. And I think we need to take the lesson from Corona and start actively addressing some of these inequalities.
Do you sometimes get frustrated that people on the social liberal side of the party are somehow seen as Labour light rather than an entity in themselves? Is that something that concerns you, or do you think it's complete and utter nonsense?
Well, it annoys me. Let's be clear, there are social liberals around in places that aren't Liberal Democrats. People like Will Hutton, who writes every week in the Observer, is undoubtedly a social liberal by any stretch of the imagination, a self-confessed social liberal. And so there have always been social liberals in other parties. In the Greens as well, we find social liberals. And we do take members from right across the political, social liberals, wherever they're to be found. I think our job is to make this agenda, this set of ideas that have propelled the Liberal Party throughout the 20th century fresh now. And I think that is ideas like the ones that Paddy put forward in Citizen Britain, but also, bringing up to date, what do we do about workplace democracy? What do we do about community politics? What do we do now about, the essence of our Europeanism was our internationalism, wasn't it? That's the essence of it, was, our belief in that we were all, one people under one sun, as it were. And I think that we've got to understand. Someone was saying to me at the webinar on Saturday that people get their head around the fact that if this virus gets into Africa, the level of immigration across Europe will dwarf what we've seen before. And we know what chaos the last surge of immigration caused. We are, as humankind, all connected. And we have got to play our part in trying to re-establish an international order. And we're faced with Trump, we're faced with Russia, we're faced with China, all with nationalistic America first, Russia first, China first policy. And we hear, quite important people in America talking about withdrawing from this and this or that international agreement. That beggars us all. You cannot put up the shutters. We've got to find a way of cooperating and developing new institutions. And that's, of course, what liberal thinkers did after the Second World War. And that's what Keynes's great contribution was in many ways. The World Bank, the IMF, all the Bretton Woods Agreement, all that was very much about putting flesh on those international institutions.
And again, that kind of perfectly leads. It's like we planned this, Iain. It's been very good. Leads on to the second of your conference fringes that you were going to have. Is basically we've been fighting on Brexit for 4 years almost. What's next for the Lib Dems? So what is next for the Lib Dems? What policies? Where should the party go to try and reverse its fortunes?
Well, well, indeed, if I had that magic bullet, I'd be a very popular man. But hard work is always the first place to start. But I do think ideas are important. I do go along with us having to have a coherent set of political ideas and a coherent strategy to carry them out. That is true. But it's got to be an appeal that isn't just to the southeast of England. I mean, I'm very worried that you could take the lesson of the last general election that the place to concentrate is the southeast of England. That isn't true. We've got to be offering something nationally to people in every community, and not retreating to a few readouts in the southeast and the southwest, or not so in the southwest, but it's not an option. We need to take the message of people having, take power is a liberal message. And we've got to make it resonant now in all our communities. And so I think we've got to think about it. And that's why I've been outlining some of the ideas that we've been talking about. You say UBI, but I think the whole question of how you how you decentralize power. Not how power is held at the centre and occasionally doled out to the fringes, but how in a federal state we could have power entrenched. I think that's we will want to be looking at that, and I think the party's been a bit slow on that. I tease my Scottish friends that really they've become more unionist than federalist, and I think we've got to begin to address that. We've got to rethink community politics, how that is relevant. We've got to think how we bring democracy to the workplace, to industrial and commercial settings, which we've always been part of our DNA, but we've got to work that out in this climate. We've got to think also about how we tackle all these wide ranges of inequality that have been exposed or made crystal clear because of the virus epidemic. Talked about how it's hit certain economically challenged groups most. But I was thinking that it's space. Before we started this chat, we were talking about, I've got a back garden, I've got an allotment, I've got plenty of space. But if I was living in a high-rise flat with 3 kids, I'd be climbing walls. I think we need to start thinking about when we're planning, developments. What is the space requirement? What rights have people got to space? The number of, allotments aren't the answer to the whole question, but the number of, there is no guidance about sort of how many allotment spaces you create in a new housing setup, and yet the density in urban areas is going to get tighter. And we've got to think about what rights people have got to space. And we've also, just to finish off the equality point, John, the only thing you can say, can't you, that BME communities have been badly hit by this virus. I suspect it's because it's chiefly they do the low-paid jobs. Predominantly, there's a preponderance of low-paid jobs, obviously, exceptions to that rule. But I think amongst hospital porters, amongst security guards, we've got to recognise that care workers, the proportion of care workers that have come from minority communities is very, very high. And we've got to start redressing the appalling way that they have been rewarded financially over the years. We've made various attempts to do things about social care and royal commissions a lot, but everyone's chickened out, or the political consensus has broken down, what with dementia taxes and then knows what else. But we've got to come up with I think we've come up that the plan is out. It's there was a royal commission. There is a clear view about how you can fund this thing properly. We need to get on and do it, and not let people keep running away from it.
And that kind of leads on then to electoral success. And it's interesting because if you've ever seen, if our listeners and viewers have seen recently, there's been lots of replays about general elections going on the TV now on BBC Parliament. But it's interesting, even if you look at the heights of kind of Lib Dem success recently, you think of 2005 and things like that, we still vast swathes of the air of Britain where we didn't cut through. You know, Midlands and North, still we didn't have vast number of seats. Okay, we had more than we have now, and we shouldn't be picky. But actually, do you think the social liberal part of the Lib Dems is the key to electoral success as well?
Well, I think we're here to achieve that, aren't we? So, I mean, David Howarth, Professor David Howarth, who we well know and love, Cambridge MP, he has not infrequently lectured us on the research that shows where the resonance in the electorate is. And it is undoubtedly, his article has been published with all the statistical and polling evidence to back it up, undoubtedly resides in that social liberal part of the political landscape. So we need to get on and sell our message in an attractive way. I take your point. You say that, but there was a time in my political lifetime, which I accept is longer than you, where, we would readily believe we could win anywhere in the country. We weren't, ghettoised into certain bits. And you think, we're thinking now, Willie Rennie won seat in Industrial Fife. Simon Hughes winning Bermondsey. You can think of not David Alton winning Liverpool Edge Hill. We weren't locked out. Michael Meadowcroft winning Leeds West. We weren't locked out of those communities. Wallace Lawler winning in Birmingham, Ladywood. You can go back and we weren't locked out of those communities in a way that we have become locked out of some of those communities now.
Or certainly not strong enough to do it over a wider constituency. My mentor, who was a councillor here in Preston for 20 odd years, Alan Hackett, said there are no-go areas for Lib Dems. The problem is we need enough Lib Dems to win those no-go areas. Well, I think that's why we need a political strategy, John, because I've been a councillor, I'd say, for 38 years, whatever it is. And, it's exhausting. I'm thinking last year, how long can I keep this? It really is, a lot of effort to do it properly. But if we're going to win seat by seat like that, we are never going to win. What we have got to do is not give up on the hard work, but what we've got to do is put together a political narrative that people can identify with. And there are, as David Howarth's research has pointed out, a large section of the electorate who do that. Now, because of first past the post, some of the tactics have to be a bit different because it's not a matter of getting 30% across the country. It's winning individual constituencies that matters. We all know that. But it makes a difference if people's default position is to vote for them, as opposed to one that they're doing it because I've sorted out the drains or because I've been down and spoken to the man whose grant hasn't come through for a small business to keep going during the lockdown. So I think don't want to give up on the hard work. I don't want to give up the conversations I have in my local community, but I do think it would make our life easier if there was a clear political narrative that people could relate to and which they defaulted to because when they were asked what their political identity was, they identified with us. And I think that kind of is almost the perfect way to end it and just say to people listening, actually, what do you want them to do? Is it to sign up to the Social Liberal Forum, become members, follow you on Facebook and Twitter and everything else?
They can do any and all of that. We do have membership. We also have supporters. You can sign up via our website. You can subscribe to our publications. As I say, we've published 2 books, collections of essays from, not just from Lib Dems, but from social liberals, academics, some of them outside of the party. Iain Cairns wrote a very important pamphlet for us last year called, when he did a companion essay to John Maynard Keynes' essay, Am I a Liberal?, which has sold extremely well. and I'm looking to pursue that series a bit more with a few other key texts brought up to date. I'm trying to persuade Jane Dodds to do one on Elliot Dodds for the historically minded amongst you. But I think we can do that, and we're happy to have people's support. Like the Facebook page, join as a supporter, which won't cost you anything, or join as a member. We'll be very pleased to have you on board.
Brilliant.
Well, I should just say, John, of course, yes, the thing that we're known for is our annual conference. I mean, that's where over the years that we've made some impact with the beverage lecture and with the high level quality speakers lists and discussions we put together. This year we were to have had Clive Lewis, the Labour MP, who stood for Labour leader, on a platform of constitutional reform, including electoral reform, who was going to speak at our conference. I'm still trying to get that virtually in place. But our conference is the big thing. It's one of the biggest gatherings of social liberals outside of the annual conferences. And we will be back on course. It will be coming your way soon.
Brilliant. Well, I really appreciate your time, Iain, today. And like I say, all listeners and viewers, do go check out the Social Liberal Forum on all their social media platforms. Do join them if you feel impressed with what Iain said today. And all I say, join as a supporter. It's completely free and help shape the way you want the party to look if you want it to change at all. But in the meantime, thank you so much for everyone who has listened or tuned in today on whether you get it via your podcast or on YouTube. You can follow everything to do with the Lib Dem Podcast at Lib Dem Pod. Make sure you subscribe as well so you never miss an episode, whether that, again, is on YouTube or on your podcast provider. Thank you so much for listening. We've got loads more coming up with interviews with more MPs and campaigners and organisers and other associations within the party, so do stay tuned. And in the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.